Well, good evening, everyone out there. Happy Friday evening to you. How was your week? I've seen and person I can say experienced a weird week. Now, give me 1 second here. Doo-doo-doo. Okay, so I'm still getting used to all of the options here. So, anyway, how is everyone? Good to see you. I'm still trying to adjust the screen here. So there we go. I'm back. At least I'm back for myself. So, as I was saying, I don't know about you, but it seems like a lot of people are really facing really some difficult times. I mean, and it just doesn't seem to be, you know, a small amount. It seems like a lot of people are struggling and struggling in a lot of different ways. It's just very interesting. Kind of makes me think, is there something else going on? Is there something, it's like being next to, let me see, a hot plate. You can get closer to it, it's going to get hot and hotter. But I don't know. So I saw an interesting article, and allow me to pull this up because I think it's really interesting. So check this out. Um, this is a story, came off foxnews.com. Your brain knows when you've just died. Now, oddly enough, our local station here in Denver actually did a story on this today as well. So, what this story is, that those who haven't seen it, is that this is a study that they did in New York City. You can see actually the story that takes place, and this is with cardiac arrest patients. Now, this is what's really odd. If you extrapolate from what this study showed, it really opens up a lot of questions. So, in essence, what we have here is this: the brain is aware of its dying, of you dying, of me, of us. I never even could have, I don't know what I was really thinking. We all have our own way of how we approach death and how we begin to reconcile the fact that it's the inevitability. There will come a time where you won't see the sunrise. So think about this. The electrical impulses continue anywhere from 2 to 22 seconds. Our brains are aware of what's taking place and aware enough to know it's dying. Now, obviously, if the brain's dying, that's you, but think about this. I was thinking about, all right, if the brain is active, even after death, does that mean the mind is registering as well? I mean, it has all sorts of implications. So, if the brain is sending electrical impulses And that's what the mind receives. And then that's what the mind imprints that we see, it's what we hear. It's everything of what we describe as reality. So 2 to 22 seconds of awareness of death. Then on the local news, they had a surgeon, and she was saying that it can take up to 6 minutes for the death process to complete. So I began to think about this. Okay, to me, this is startling. I mean, I don't know about you, but I actually wrote down when I heard this what my perception of death would be like. And, you know, I know what happens on a quantum level. I know what they say that happens on a cellular level. Science still can't define the mind or consciousness. They're definitely, well, we're all in search of it. Our whole species is in search of it. That's really what it comes down to. And yet, in spite of everything that man has conceived, we still haven't been able to find it. So let me continue, not to digress here. So for me, I thought, well, I don't know if it's a matter of a momentary moment of unconsciousness and then awareness. I have read somewhere in the past that one neurobiologist was saying in the article, and I believe it was a male, that it's very possible you enter into a brilliance of light because the synaptic impulses are all exploding and losing cohesion on a cellular level. And so as each part of the cell begins to dissolve, is consciousness attached to that physical process. Then think about this. So let's say that you and I and the rest of us here and everyone in the chat room, by the way, I'm glad I reminded myself this. Thank you. I had a note here and it says, look here. Sure enough. So if this is 2 to 22 seconds of awareness, is it possible that you could define eternity in that 2 to 22 seconds and for the entire death process to complete itself 6 minutes? Now, obviously, if there is, extreme blunt trauma of some sort, who knows? No one will know. But in this case, could that be an eternity? And I wrote down my questions right here. And I began to ask myself, all right, how do you define eternity, Wayne? My answer is I would define eternity to what I have been taught from this corporeal process. That's how I measure my existence, is by a mechanical function. And that's really what time is. Otherwise, how do we measure it? Now, at the point of death, it has been said that 1,000 years is 1 year. Well, if eternity, and I heard and read that it's impossible for our species, for mankind, to even define eternity because we're finite in our thought process. We have to have a beginning and we have to have an end. Now, the concept is that, well, eternity would have no end. But then what do you do when you see certain things written about eternity of eternities? Gives it in that. And again, are we measuring eternities by a mechanical function measured on a 360-degree plane? So could that 2 seconds be an eternity? It begins to make you think, doesn't it? And I still marvel at the fact that the mind, the brain, is aware. I'm just going to be candid with you. It just freaks me out. I mean, it just freaks me out to think that wherever that happens, right? And however it happens, my wife being a nurse for many years, who has experienced patients who have died and been resuscitated, and some having the most remarkable recoveries and full, total awareness of what was going on. Not just one, but as she has recanted the story, and probably many of you who are probably nurses out there, I know there's a number of the subscribers that are nurses, who have been in those trauma type situations, and then to have the patients come back and say, yeah, I was very much aware of it, giving detailed conversations. It kind of just really goes and makes you think. So anyway, I thought I'd just open up with that subject because it is one that I'm going to have to ponder. It really is. How many of you remember the movie Ghost with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze? Probably one of the best modern day love stories, I would say. Anyway, how the story and the characters, as we all know with Whoopi Goldberg, that apparently there's a lot of spirits, souls that don't quite know what to do. They apparently get lost on that other side. Kind of makes you think about that, doesn't it? Then it makes you think, then what is the whole soul and the mind? Is the mind the reflection of the soul? Does the soul imprint itself upon the mind? Interesting questions. So, moving on to the next one. How many of you have been enjoying the story about Adam and Eve? Now, I know it's the pseudo-apocrypha. I get it. But I'll have to quote Spock in the original Star Trek. Captain, every legend is founded upon, if nothing more, than a grain of truth. So I see this, and I know when these books were put together, um, first century AD, think about this. An error that was a era truly of, in a lot of ways, of enlightenment. I mean, the populations were very well educated. Um, you know, if you wanted to look at technology, it was advancing, albeit at a different pace than what we consider to be progress, but nevertheless. And yet, it still remains one of the least written about centuries. We have plenty of writings starting after and into the second century and going forward. But the first century itself, there was apparently a deliberate and systematic process of eliminating documents, writings. Now, the problem is that when you try to go and advance on such a strategy, you probably have never figured the random factor. And the random factor is that inevitably someone will either put it to memory or someone will ferry off a copy, and then centuries later, sometimes millennia later, they surface. So when you approach these books in that approach, that this was written most likely in the first century AD, maybe as early as the third century BC. Hard to tell. But however it came about, I find this story really interesting in so many ways. For me, it's beginning to paint this tapestry that I can now think about what I was always taught. And now I can begin to put this picture to it. Now, whether the picture is an allegory, metaphor, whether you want to say that, well, I like that part because that part really fills in the gap for me, kind of makes sense. There's nothing wrong with that. Listen, we're talking about documents that are thousands of years old. It's remarkable that they even existed. So, just some of my points. I'm still thinking about this. I had to do some running about today and gave me a lot of time to think. I don't care how you look at this. Eve got screwed, figuratively and literally. I mean, and by the way, I've really been, I'm having to look at this and I'm going back and I'm going, I guess God breathed into her, right? I'm having to go back in there. I don't think so. I'm not sure. But how the story unfolds is that man is the image of God, as we the installment today, and there will be a part 3. So Seth is walking with Eve back to paradise. So it really gives me now kind of an idea that paradise was a physical place. Going with the story that, you know, the banishment story that we all were taught in Sunday school, talk about time jump and time travel. You know, it's like you go from the expulsion and then, you know, you've got Cain and Abel. Someone said today, and I agree with you, all right, it's written that Eve only had 5 children, but then in the Apocrypha that we're reading, Adam sired 30 males and 30 females. sons and daughters. Well, if it wasn't Eve, then who was it? I mean, it's already weird as it is. When you really stop and think about it, is what we're learning in that is that I could get where Adam would come in this, that the whole idea of sex would be repulsive. I mean, you were going to be living forever. In fact, I'll give you a sneak preview. I never knew this, but you'll hear this in part 3. Adam had apparently the east to the south of the garden, and Eve had the northern domain of the garden. They were separated. And according to the Apocrypha now, the male animal stayed with Adam and the female animal stayed with Eve. And as she is recounting the story on her deathbed to all of her children, she said that Satan entered in when they were on guard. Apparently, they were light beings. They had the ability to defend, and they let their guard down, is more or less what they were. And I found that very interesting. And it also clearly states that there apparently is a physical boundary, like a force field. So I just found that really interesting how this story begins to unfold. And part of this story is the apocalypse of Adam. Apparently, Adam had a vision that they get into detail on of how this whole thing's going to end. But getting back to the original point of this, all I got to say is Eve got screwed. And, you know, she kind of basically said the same thing. I mean, this is a soul that was by any definition abused. I mean, brokenhearted. I mean, they ostracized the woman. Adam did as well. But again, I guess I could see Adam's confusion. I mean, here he was perfect in his creation. And then because the Elohim, the creators, and it is creators, it was in their image. He felt that he was perfect, but they felt that he needed a companion, that he was somehow lonely. So I never thought out from this point of view, but I could see if I was Adam, I don't know. I guess I could see where he's going, but I was complete. And then when the female part of him, and that's what I said in the presentation, the woman, you know, Eve was created from that of the female part of the species. That's the other confusing thing about this, is that the first part we get male and female he created, but in the second one it was just the male and then the female out of the male. I mean, it's a trippy story when you begin to think about it. You're going, okay. All right, moving on. I have a video I want to show you. So give me a second here. And okay. It's not letting me do what I want, but I'm going to get it done anyway. There it is. Okay. So check this out, because I think that this has some relevancy into the next subject. So to set for you, well, I'll just let it play out for you. Check this out. And I'm hoping that you're seeing this. So they're driving along. Bam! Where did that come out from? Check this out. Look at that. Out of nowhere. Let's just go back and take one more look at that. And I'm going to try to slow it down frame by frame. Now, look where it's coming into materialization. I have a theory on this. Listen on this one. So here we go. Now the car is clearly materialized. Bam! So what did we just witness here? Now they're calling it a ghost car. I don't know if I would call it that. What if we're seeing alternate realities merging? And they hit. So, let me get out of here. What do you think? So follow with me on this, all right? We saw, and by the way, you can go on YouTube, and I found at least 6 that I came across real quick of these cameras, whether they're dash mounted, whether they are in the traffic mounted, of more and more other people, other vehicles emerging out of nowhere. Now, follow me on this. All right? It'll be worth it. Could it be possible, right, that our timeline has been changed? And what if I could show you proof that this has already occurred and we are living in an alternate dimension, but only slightly altered? But the effects are becoming more and more profound. Now, think about this. When you talk about matter, and this is what you and I are made of, and you get down to the subatomic level of these particles, if you were to bring in a substance from an altered dimension or reality at the subatomic particle level, the quantum level, what would that do? You would bring material from outside into our reality. Think about this. I'm convinced as I continue to observe, we are seeing more and more very strange phenomenon. Now, I'm talking specifically about quantum computing. These computers that are made by such companies like D-Wave that actually take environments down to just 2 degrees above absolute zero. That's like minus, bear with me, was it 400 and I want to say 457 degrees minus Fahrenheit? I may be off on something like that, but they bring it down to just 2 degrees above that. They create a bubble. And these, I've heard them called the God chips. They're actually qubits. And they actually form quantum realities. Now, we began to observe this decades ago when we began to see into that subatomic layer reality. And what we found, what the physicists found, was that there was this phenomenon called quarks. And this was matter that would pop into our reality and then pop out. Completely random. So we knew something else was behind here. So D-Wave, and I'm going to show this, has already said they've gone in to other realities, other dimensions, and they have extrapolated substance from those other dimensions and brought them back into ours. Now think about this. If that in fact has happened, well, I'll put it this way. If you ever get a virus, right, even a bacterium that is a single cell, we all know it can kill you. I mean, it's not the big things so much that harm you, it's the very smallest that we can't see. All right, I put something together here. So give me 1 second. All righty. Thank you for your patience. All right. So I put this together. So this is in 2013. D-Wave said, our computer, our quantum computer, is 100 million times faster than the PC. This is what runs Google, folks. Quantum computers. All right. A little brain exercise. Most of our systems today are at 256. You know, if you have in financials, what we call FIs, financial institutions, you're at a 256 SSL. There is 512, and you can get into the RSA, which is approaching just right out that 512, and 1024 is out there. But think about this. We talk about those in single jumps. You know, I can multiply to the 2 times the power. Same thing, it's exponential. But now think about the ability to say, have 256 at the 10th power. Then think about 512 at the 100th power. And again, 1024 at the 1000th power, 248 at the 10,000th power. Incredible numbers where they're not even approaching the quantum. As incredibly large as those numbers are, they're still not even in the race. So very quickly, I know this may sound boring, but it's really important. So basically, the classic algorithm that you do in coding is that you have a bit, ones or zeros. Well, with the qubit, you can have ones and zeros, but the zeros and ones can be both the same and the opposite. And you're dealing with literally the whole space. I just did this so I could just show you that, oh, wow, this is big numbers. And do I know what any of this math is? No, but I can perceive enough to know that this is like lightning fast. I mean, the human brain, and by the way, these are the elements coming out of quantums. You got the quarks and you got the leptons. Look at this, folks. Think about this. New models for new elements. Are we seeing this, or are we just discovering it? So you and I are made up of atoms and subatomic particles. And that's how reality is. This is our reality. So think about subatomic particles. And I know this may be boring for some of you, but for those of you who really want to know what's going on, because this is going to really have an impact into this next portion here. So think about this. If you can begin to change structure on the subatomic level, you can change reality. And this is the depiction of quantum reality, where we can go into these other realities and apparently extract substance. And this is the one that started it. Look at the shielding they do. 50,000 times. And by the way, these are the older models. I thought this one was really interesting, folks. Look where this thing is going. Look where it's gone in less than 14 years. I found this really interesting. Do you know Nikola Tesla spent a lot of time on the ether force? How many of you know that? And now I'm going to get into the chat room here before the end of the hour, but how many of you have ever heard of the ether force? Yeah. He says, I consider myself the original discoverer of this truth. What was the truth? Well, only the existence of a field of force can account for the motions of the bodies as observed, and its assumptions dispenses with space curvature. All literature on this subject is futile and destined to be oblivion. So are all attempts to explain the workings of the universe without recognizing the existence of the ether and the indispensable function it plays in the phenomenon. My second discovery was of a physical truth of the greatest importance. As I have searched the entire scientific records in more than a half dozen languages for a long time without finding the least anticipation, I consider myself the original discoverer of this truth, which can be expressed by the statement: there is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment. Now you take scientists, mathematicians that know about this. Listen to this. Quantum computation will be the first technology that allows useful tasks to be performed in collaboration between parallel universes. What I'm trying to drive to the point here, folks, I believe our timeline has been contaminated. This is what the CEO and founder of D-Wave said. When they first turned it on, he said, it's like being at the altar of an alien god. You can see that speech. Like being at the altar of an alien god. The universe has its secrets. Extra dimensions of space might be one of them. If so, the universe has been hiding those dimensions, protecting them, keeping them coyly under wraps. From a casual glance, you would never suspect a thing. It's been said by the ancient philosophers, the alchemists, the magicians, that it's not that far away. The fact that we live in that coexistence. So I want you to think about this. They're now talking fifth dimension. How would we know? I think we are seeing fragments, filaments of this alternate material. And you got to think about all this. Matter. One particle alter changes everything. And I think that is what's happened. Get back here. I really do. When you go to the D-Wave website now, in fact, let me just do that, because you really have to see this to appreciate this. So let's go, here we go. To speed computation, quantum computers tap directly into an unimaginable vast fabric of reality, the strange and counterintuitive world of quantum mechanics. So if you bring in a foreign substance and you bring it into this timeline, eventually that alteration on that subatomic level will begin to show effects in our perception of reality. I'm convinced to a pretty good certainty we're living, I think in many cases, we're seeing these dimensions merge, come in and then swing back out. I think we're seeing it in the heavens. I think we're seeing it, and when I say the heavens, I mean out in the universe itself. I think if you alter, and I believe that these, call them strings, parallel universes, I believe that it's like tungsten. It's great on the fact that it can take a great deal of heat. But on the tinsel, how it becomes very fragile. And this is what I think's happened. I think these dimensions, these realities are robust, but I believe that if they can be pierced, penetrated in, and if you have the ability to pull them back out, the material, I think that they become unstable. I think it's like you're contaminating it. And just a theory that could it be that this is what we're seeing? Because you can't say anyone that spends any time on YouTube, on any amount of the channels, listen, I'm seeing people that are building devices. I think it's the Huffington Paranormal, great channel. I mean, Steve has actually built these boxes. Got one now called the White Box, but talking to spirits on the other side, or not the other side. I mean, they're here. It's this veil, this force field, whatever. We're seeing advancements in others, and then we're seeing the strangest things happening. And some of them just defy explanation. And it covers the gamut. I mean, could it be that this is what we're seeing? I don't know. But it certainly seems that something's happening. By the way, I saw today a article on millennials, 18 to 30 years olds, that they are now, by a larger percentage, we're getting above 50% better, they've given up on religion and they are seeking their path to spirituality through Wiccan, through the gifts of, whether it be tarot, whether it be crystals, but they're seeking the answers really, and which tells me that they're getting it. They're listen, if they're going down that path, that means they're eventually going to see the path within. And I just find that to be very interesting. So could it be? Let me see. Let me go into the chat room. Well, I can see everyone in there. Hello, Kat. Hello. Hello, Tammy, April, David, Sunshine. Good to see you. So here we go. Now I'm going to get this. You see, I love this thing. I can actually see what time travel is like. At least about a 5-second delay either way. I'm just reading some of y'all's comments, that's all. How would I find a moderator? I could use one. Anyone to volunteer? Hello? Hi, Bob. How you doing? Hi, Amanda. Well, hello, everyone. It's good to talk to y'all like this. Kind of like having you right into the living room. Oh, really? Kelsey, I'm seeing that. Your grandson, Hunter? On his spirit walk. Wow. Hi, David. How you doing? You want to be the Davey, how would I make you a moderator? Let me see. How would I do that? Do. Mr. Anderson. Good to see you. Hi, Chris. I love it. Now, this is my Steely Dan attire. Okay, let me see something. All right, Davey, give me 1 second here. All right, Davey, you're a moderator. Go for it. Da-da-da-dum. So what do y'all think? Anything on the quantum issue on bringing back hold on there. I'm trying to. Who was the. Who else said they wanted to help be a moderator? Mary. And along comes Mary. Do. All right. There you go. So anyway, I'm just curious. Did anyone find that to be interesting? Do you think it's any possibility that our reality has been altered? Yeah. I'm telling you, I think that if they have done what they have said, that they have brought in substance from other dimensions, I don't think we really know what we're actually dealing with. Hi, April. Thank you. It is kind of strange, isn't it? Little different subject, but as I keep seeing it, I swear at times I think that I'm living in a different planet. If we can change reality, does it stay in existence? That's a good question. I think that it does, but I don't know if it would stay in this timeline. And that's my big concern, is that how would we know that our timelines are altered? I mean, if we're seeing like this car crash, that car materialized out of nowhere. Well, we know that that's not possible. We know that substance, matter has to come from somewhere. That only tells me that it was probably in a parallel dimension right next to ours. Has something been torn? You know, it's like, well, it's like having a hernia. You know, you never know it until it ruptures, right? I don't know. I find it just extremely, how shall we say, interesting to ponder. Thank you, Spartan. Great. Yeah. I don't know if you caught the first part when I started the show tonight, but we're really going to get into part 3 of this. And I'll tell you what, again, who knows at this point what reality is and where we came from and how we started. I'm almost convinced we'll never know. I swear, we just never will know. Um, and again, and maybe it's just me, but I keep on thinking that if a person has died of cardiac arrest and they're conscious, their brain is aware that the brain is dying. That's just freaky, folks. It's just, I mean, trust me, I will be up tonight thinking on that one. So who knows? Hey, we're finding out things about ourselves and about our species that is just wild, isn't it? So, hey, listen, I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming on. Thank you for spending an hour of your life listening to me. Um, there is how many of you remember that movie 8 Days a Week? Uh, it was a B-rated, but it's a great B-rated love movie that came out in the 80s. Anyway, there's a great scene in there where the main character guys watch this woman that him and his friend, because he's camping out in front of his girlfriend's yard. You have to watch it. It's a great movie. You'll like it. But they see this elderly woman, and she mows the yard at midnight. She has her meals in the car, and then they find her at times on the roof with a pair of binoculars. And they watch this, you'll watch the movie, you'll get the gist of it. So he finally decides to go over and talk to the woman. And she invites him in and she says, I've seen you. You've been watching me. And he said, yes. And she said, I bet you think I'm crazy. And he said, well, you certainly act crazy. And she says, tell me specifically what makes you think that I'm crazy. He says, well, for instance, you mow your yard at midnight. And she says, yes. She says, with electric lawnmower. She says, because the pollen is less at that time. And she says, I'm sensitive to the heat and it's cooler. He said, well, that makes sense. He says, all right, why are you eating your meals in your car? She says, because my radio in the house doesn't work as good as the radio in my car. And they have the program that I like to listen to. I can hear it better in the car. And he says, well, all right, those two I can accept. But what about the third one? He said, what are you doing on your roof with the pair of binoculars and a phone? She says, my friend, whoever the friend was, she says she's becoming senile. And she says, when I sit on my roof, I can see her leave her house and she has her cordless phone in the car and I can watch her as she comes over here. So the point to all this, never doubt the stimulation of eccentricity because it keeps us not only entertained, but it also makes us kind of look at things and go, well, maybe there's something more to that. And that's what I appreciate. Again, thank you all. I'm going to start doing this every Friday night. And listen, email me, put it in the comments. I'm actually recorded this, so I'll actually post it on for everyone else to watch. And let me know of a topic. I'll start researching it. I mean, tonight, Bob, thank you. Davey, thank you. For the rest of you who gave some ideas. And listen, I think we need to think about this quantum computing. I keep telling you, if this is what they're doing, Folks, we could just be in a whole world of hurt. I mean, who knows then what would be reality? You'd have no way of knowing. Listen, when I found out they didn't know the name of the God that I've been praying to all my life, I said, holy crap. You know, and the thing is, we never check the references when we sign on. You know, we're all going, yeah, I'm going to buy that story. Okay. And, you know, you accept it. You know, it's like, okay, it's gospel. It's gospel. And you can be like me 40 years later, and you're going, might be a good idea if I just do some background checks on this. And lo and behold, you go, oh man, yeah, we've all had that. It's we've all had those moments where you just, hey, sometimes it's just that away. And if we're fortunate enough to keep young, young in heart, young of mind, and laugh at ourselves. You know, I used to be a really uptight asshole. There was a bumper sticker I remember in the 80s when I went to Las Vegas. Back in the 80s, I was in the video post industry, and the National Association of Broadcasters every year had their show in Las Vegas right around, it was always around April 15th. It was always weird. And anyway, I remember walking, and I think that I think we're the Tropicana. Yeah. And I was down there walking out, and they had one of these little gift shops there, right? And then it had bumper stickers. How many of you remember when bumper stickers were really popular? Talking about a good way to devalue your property, put a bumper sticker on. And then they got really creative where the glue, you know, would take the bumper off. And that was when bumpers were still chrome. How many of you remember that? Anyway, I digress. The bumper sticker said, Jesus loves you because everyone else thinks you're an asshole. Well, you know, that's how I guess we evolve. I said this the other night on Jeff's channel. You know, every Wednesday night, by the way, um, I do a show with Jeff over on his channel, and we'll get Jeff over here and do one of the episodes here so everyone can see it on our end. Anyway, think about this. Back in the 90s, I was a real big fan of Brian Tracy's, Earl Nightingale, Zig Ziglar, um, guys, Tony Robbins. And I remember one of the things that Earl Nightingale said, and I guess it's so true today. I'm going a little bit over, so I apologize on that. But he said this. He said, so often we leave our childhood with many unresolved issues. And we leave a child that never had the opportunity to become adult. And as a result, that child still, in many cases, is harmed, hurt. And Earl Nightingale said that, you know, if you can always go back and let that child go, that it helps resolve a lot of issues that many adults have. I began to think about that, and I'd love to have had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Nightingale, in as much that I would have to say, yeah, maybe. But I also believe that that childhood, that being that was there, is gone. And I continue to believe this as you look back on your life. All of you there in the chat room, if you think about your life, you've lived and died for as many seconds, hours, days. Because I know this, the person I am today is not what I was 25 years ago. I am the essence of that man, but that man is not the man that I am today. And I wonder now, because here's the thing. Inside, I'm still that rock and roller. I'm still that dude that worked for Concerts West, made a lot of money selling marijuana. Yeah, I did. Um, did pretty good at the age of 16, trust me. But anyway, the point is, I see myself inside is that individual, that energy. You know, you really have, as we all know, unfortunately for us males, we peak out at 18. Tell me we haven't digressed. But hey, you know, I do believe that within us all, and ladies, it's true, y'all just a little bit further down the line. But even we're seeing those changes in our species. But in any case, when you get to my age, where I'm 62, and it's still, when Tom Petty passed away, it was like, oh man, you know, Elvis Presley, I remember when he passed away, but it was like, yeah, all right, the dude got really out of shape, you know, but now, I'm waiting at any time when you hear one of the Rolling Stones have passed on. And, here we are. And, I look at it and I go, 62, are you kidding me? And then the reality sets in. Like, all right, Steiger, so let's just say world stays together. I mean, we don't all go bat crap crazy, or, someone pushes the button, or something doesn't hit the planet, or, disclosure is made. In fact, we really are finding out that there is this alien battle going in and on right above us. And yet somehow or another, the net will go down and they're going to actually, who knows? But if all that doesn't happen and everything continues on, the classic rock and roll that they call now classic, the first generation of classic rock and roll, and I heard that, I said, that's a bunch of crap. The first generation of classic rock and roll. Hell, I played the clarinet, played the flute, and played the bassoon. I still like listening to Frank Sinatra. Yeah. And, that to me is classic, or the classics, Beethoven, etc. So I know I've digressed here a little bit, but nevertheless, to finish out the thought, all right, 20 years. All right, so 20 years, I'll tell you what 20 years, how I calculate time in my head. So I look at decades, all right? And I know very young 90-year-olds. I know very old 50-year-olds. And I said, okay, let's say that I'm still being able to maintain the energy, right? They figure out how to turn on the genes. I go and I get the gene therapy, right? All right, hear me out. So 20 years, right? Well, you see, I calculate that as another 7,000 days. Yeah, I'll take that. Who wouldn't? I mean, if I could tell you right now, I could guarantee you that when you got to age 62, and hope that all of you do, and those who have gone a little bit older, high fives. Hey, listen, we may have made this mess, but boy, we are giving them a good time, aren't we? They got their smartphones. So I tell you that you would have 7,000 days if you take it right now. Would you do it? Yeah, most of you would. I mean, at least you know you got 7,000 days. The only problem then becomes it would drive you crazy. Oh, probably for the first 3,000, wouldn't even give it a second thought. It's that when you pass that point, you're going, okay. Yeah. All right, folks. I do appreciate you. Have yourself a good evening. I might come back on tomorrow. I don't want to waste anyone's time, but who knows? Maybe we can have just a kind of like an open mic thing. Isn't that odd? So I've been on 1 hour, 11 minutes, and at that point, 11 seconds. I think that tells that I think it's a good energy here, folks. All right. Appreciate all the moderators. Y'all have yourselves a good evening. Be kind to one another. Remember, each word you speak got energy to it. Okay, let me just tell you one more little anecdote here. So, Dancer, my toy fox terrier, is a very sensitive dog. Takes after me. I'm a very sensitive guy. True. But anyway, when people that she doesn't know, or sometimes people she does know, when they use profanity, she immediately responds very negative to that. You can see it. So it tells me that our words have energy, both positive and negative. Let's always sow the positive words into our lives, into the lives of others. Hey, then we always have a harvest. Good karma all the way around. All right, folks, we'll talk soon. And thank you again. Now I have to say, how do I get out of here? No.